I'm going to go ahead and we'll start the seminar here. I'll introduce Dr. Qifei Niu, who's Associate Professor at the Department of Geosciences at Boise State University. His research focuses on near-surface geophysics, critical zone hydrology, geothermal resources, and soil rock physics. And his research combines field observations, computer modeling, and laboratory studies to understand water-related properties and processes in the subsurface, including both freshwater and thermal waters. So Dr. Niu obtained his PhD in civil engineering from Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. So without any further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Niu. And again, as folks formulate questions, please feel to type them in the chat, or we'll turn the mics on at the end of the seminar and you can ask them verbally if you choose. So thanks again and take it away.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much for the introduction. Yeah, so good morning, everyone. Yeah, I think it's good morning still, morning in the morning. Yeah, so it's my pleasure to give a talk about rock moisture dynamics in the semi-arid hill slopes. And when we see semi-arid, it's like we're focusing on Idaho bathless, which is very site called the Dry Creek Experimental Watershed. And that is very close to our Boise State campus. And then that's part of the reason why we choose that site. And also part of the reason why we choose that site is because we have very long-term field monitoring data, meteorological data, and also soil moisture stream flow data. Yeah. So today I'm going to focus on some insights from the field geophysical results. And here is the outline, just a second. Yeah, here's the outline of this presentation. First, I'm going to introduce the background, what is rock moisture and why it is important. And also, we'll share some of the previous results from hydrological modeling. And here, hydrological modeling is, we call it geophysics-informed hydrological modeling. That means it's like we incorporate a lot of geophysical data into the hydrological modeling to improve the predictions so that we can better quantify what is soil moisture, what is rock moisture. And also, after that, I'm going to show two different geophysical results, electrical resistivity results at two sites. One is a conifer slope, another one is a shrub slope. They are at a little, the elevation is a little different, and also the climate is a little different. And end of the presentation, I'm going to summarize the main findings from the geophysical results. Okay, so first of all, it's like we're talking about watershed, and then the most important thing in watershed is like the hydrological partitioning. When we talk about hydrological partitioning, we talk about different processes. For example, in Idaho, most of the mountain regions, and then what we have is we have precipitation. Most of precipitation, they are in the form of snow. And then when they are on the ground, and then they can stay there, and then when the temperature goes up, they can melt. And the melt water will contribute to stream flow generation. And also, if it rains, if the precipitation in the form of rain, and then it can go directly contribute to the stream flow generation. And also within the watershed, another what flux is the evapotranspiration, and then they can from conifer trees, they can also from the shrubs. And what usually is neglected, it's not neglected, rather it's like people pay less attention to is the subsurface storage. For example, in the shallow soil layer, and then you have soil moisture, and also beyond soil layer, you have another layer which is called which is the fractured bedrock layer. Fractured bedrock layer later, we'll explain that. I'm going to explain that. That's they call that a very important layer that is due to weathering, and then it has some significant roles in water partitioning. Yeah. So why we want to study watershed function is because right now our knowledge is limited, especially in terms of with the climate change, we have higher temperature, and also with higher temperature, the precipitation we get traditionally is like mostly snow, and then they are going to transit from snow to rain. And then what's the impact on the hydrological partitioning in the watershed, we still don't know yet. And also we've seen more frequent extreme weathers, and for example, drought, and sometimes wildfires. All of this will affect the stream flow generation because in Idaho, our water are pretty much rely on the snow melt flow. And then but what the challenges are is like we don't know how to quantify the hydrological, especially it's like different components of hydrological partitioning. In particular, it's like a subsurface storage. And some of you may just wondering like why subsurface matters. And then here's one example from the one of the paper published in Geophysical Research Letter in 2022. It is talking about the California, and California, when they predict the water available for the next year based on the snowpack, they usually use the April 1st, the snowpack, the thickness, water, the SWE, the snow water equivalence on April 1st, and then try to predict what's the maximum stream flow in the next summer and or spring. And then here's one example, is like they use that method to predict for 2021, the year 2021, because there was a severe drought. And then what they predict somewhere is around this point. And then what they measured is much lower than the prediction. And then if you look at the prediction, for example, this one, it just shows so in general, the trend is very good. It's like your prediction and the observation there agree very well. But there's some outliers, for example, 2021, that's one case. And also, if you look at the difference between the measured and prediction, that's the plot B, and then they show it. And then they are presented as a fraction of the total water volume of the year. And then you can see during 2021, the overestimation is about 10%. It's more than 10% of the total stream flow. What I think it's like a total what year, the precipitation. Yeah. So the question becomes like, okay, where did the water go? So you overestimate, but in the river, you didn't really have that amount of water. Where did the water go? Many people just say they are invoking the specific storage component to explain this disappeared water. Okay, so in this slide, in this presentation, I'm going to put everything in the framework of Earth's critical zone, and because this is yeah, it's in the last 10 years or 20 years, this concept has been popular in earth science and also in hydrology. So what is a critical zone? It's like critical zone is like it extends from the top of the canopy, go all the way down to the bottom groundwater circulation. And also critical zone is important because it provides life-sustaining resources like water and food. And also within this process, within this critical zone, and there are many processes happening. It includes physical weathering, chemical weathering, hydrological processes, and also biological processes as well. And also, because of these processes, and then the critical zone itself, although it's very shallow, it's like tens of meters, and then it is very complex. And then near the surface, you have this fully developed soil layer. And also beyond that, you have regoliths. And the regoliths, you have saprolite, which they are weathered from bedrock, and then they are not soil yet. Even go beyond, and then it's like you have fractured bedrock. And the fractured bedrock is like there was some degree, some chemical weathering happened, but it's not the material itself is like they are still parent materials. But there's a lot of fractures due to physical weathering. And beyond the fractured bedrock, and then you have the fresh bedrock. And then that's pretty much it's the Earth's critical zone. And then within the Earth's critical zone, it's like we're talking about subsurface storage. And in the subsurface, the water can be stored in 3 different forms. One is soil moisture. That's just the moisture contained in the soils, which, for example, you can see is ignored in this plot. And also for the rock moisture, that's the moisture contained in the fractured bedrock, which is above the intact bedrock. And groundwater is the saturated groundwater. Usually it's like we think that's at the fractured bedrock and fresh bedrock interface. And the rock moisture, for example, you can see that from this well 15, for example. Well 15 is on the top of the slope. You can see the red lines, they are the rock moisture content measured during the dry season, and the blue lines, they are moisture content measured during the wet seasons. And then and also you can see this bar indicates the groundwater level, fully saturated groundwater level. And then you can see all the water like and also fractured bedrock is the gray area from about 5 meters below. That's fractured bedrock. You didn't see fresh bedrock at all in this well. And then you can see it's like during the season, there's some water contained in the fractured bedrock. They are not in fully saturated condition, rather just in vadose zone, but they do play a role here. They exist there. So this part of moisture content is termed as rock moisture. And soil moisture is above, for example, in this case, well 15 is above 4 meters. Yeah. Yeah. So rock moisture is like a storage in the rocks above the groundwater level. And also many studies have shown that it is a stable source for the plants will use. And also it can discharge to the streams in the dry seasons. So that's why I know we want to study more about rock moisture. And if the slope is just simple as the previous figure, we show that, and then it will be much easier to study the rock moisture. But in reality, it's like the critical zone itself is very heterogeneous. And this heterogeneous is like a cross skews. For example, if you look at this Piton skew, it's like a soil pit skew, and then you can see it's like you have different horizon. At different horizon, you have different texture, and also mineralogy is also different. All of this will change the soil, their holding capacity. And also this is only at several, like 1 meter perhaps. And then if you look at that Piton is only on figure B is a slope. The slope is about 800 meters. And then you can see this soil pit is only at the near surface. And then go deeper, and then you still have a lot of, this is the seismic velocity image. So this red color, their low velocity, it indicates it's soil. And then below that soil layer is fresh bedrock. Their velocity is somehow between the fresh bedrock, which is 5,000 roughly in this case, and then somewhere in between you have fracture bedrock. Their velocity is between 1,000 roughly 1,000 and 5,000 in this case. Yeah. This is like a slope scale, and then several slopes, right? And then if you look at the watershed scale, so this is the airborne EM data from the Reynolds Creek Critical Zone Observatory, and then you can see the X distance is like 12 kilometers. They've done airborne EM survey, and then the image B is only a small part of the whole watershed, and from this image C, you can see it's like all the slope everywhere is like they're heterogeneous. It's like it didn't show a very homogeneous subsurface at all. So this makes our study of the critical zone more difficult. Okay, so for this research, I'm trying to answer several questions. And the first question is, what is the seasonal dynamic of rock moisture in comparison with soil moisture? And then most of the studies just focus on using the well logging data, and well logging data only can drill a well at several locations, and also it's very expensive. And for example, like in Dry Creek, we've never had a well, although it's like has been around for more than 20 years, and then we don't have a well yet. And also the second question is, does the plant cover affect the rock or soil moisture dynamics or not? For example, if you're at a higher elevation, so usually you have conifer trees, and then lower elevation you have shrubs, and then does this plant cover will affect the soil moisture and rock moisture or not? And also, does slope aspect affect rock moisture dynamics? I'm not sure you know slope aspect or not. In Dry Creek, that's several valleys. You can see distinct feature, like a plant feature on different aspects. One is north facing, one is south facing, and then in the north facing slope, you have a lot of conifer trees. On the other side, you just don't have trees at all, just shrubs. And then this plot B is a hypothesized effect of elevation on the storage capacity. It's like on the subsurface water storage. Yeah. This one is like we still need to test that. So in this study, I'm trying to use some geophysical data to give some insights about some answers to these questions. Okay, so some results from hydrological modeling. This is like a PhD student of mine, and he did the simulation about 2 years ago. Yeah, so we use something called geophysics informed hydrological modeling, and also we use a site, which is the second site we're going to show. It's called treeline site, which is at the snow to rain transition zone, and also the vegetation here is pretty much, I think it's shrub dominated. For example, this is the watershed. What we did here is like we run a series of seismic refraction survey, And then once we collect the data, and then we invert it, eventually we're going to build a 3D seismic velocity model. And from the seismic velocity model, as we mentioned earlier, a little bit, it's like a soil and rock, fractured bedrock, and then fresh bedrock. Their seismic velocity is quite different if we're not talking about the influence of lithology, because in Idaho batholiths, we pretty much have only granite. And then from the seismic velocity, and then we can determine, okay, what is the soil layer? What is the depth extent across this watershed? And also, what is the fractured bedrock layer? And also, what is the fresh bedrock and fractured bedrock their interface? From the 3D seismic velocity model, we can create this subsurface model, 3 layers, and then we incorporate this seismic derived velocity model, subsurface model into hydrological modeling, and then we try to simulate at what dynamics in each of the layers. And then, so here is the results. I just want to show the very important thing is the regolith storage. Here, regolith in this presentation is like is like soil, just soil. Yeah. So regolith actually in critical zone, it includes both soil and saprolite. But here it just indicates like we use soil to represent regolith. So soil means it's like it contains saprolite. So bedrock is just the fractured bedrock. It's a fractured bedrock part. And then you can see it's like from this figure you can clearly separate the regolith, the soil moisture and the rock moisture. The yellow bar, they're just rock moisture, and the blue, they are the soil moisture. From this figure, you can see several things. And first one is like a soil water storage shows a similar trend with precipitation. So you can see it's like the blue ones, their response temporal trend is very clear. It's very relevant to the precipitation. You have a high precipitation, for example, from February to May, and then you have high soil moisture, which is very clear. And also, you can see the rock moisture is not in phase with soil moisture. When we say in phase, that means, for example, it's like the peak of the soil moisture and peak of the rock moisture. When they're in phase, they should be at the same time, right? But in this case, you can see rock moisture, their peak is around May, early May or end May, early May, I would say. And for the soil moisture, their peak is March. That's like a 2 months delay for the rock moisture. And also in the wetting period, yeah, that's about 2 months delay. And in the drying period, let's look at the rock moisture. Their lowest time is around August, early August. But for soil moisture, their lowest time is starts around July, end of July, early July. It's about it's about 1 month delay for the rock moisture. And also in terms of the total amount of rock moisture and soil moisture, it's like from this simulation, you can see they are pretty much similar, for example, at this time. And they're about, I don't know, from 20 to 70. That's like a 50, yeah, that's like a 50% of the total, 50% of the total storage. And then it's half of the total storage. So it's roughly similar to the rock moisture. Yeah. That's from the hydrological modeling. And so what we are trying to do is like we're trying to collect some field data to see, okay, does the conclusion we found from hydrological modeling can be supported by some field data or not? And then let's look at the first site. First site is somewhere we call Lower Deer Point, is at this location of the Drag Creek. And then here are some figures showing the site what it look like. And then here's image showing the satellite image showing the land cover. You can see pretty much this site, this line, this blue line is the line that we run the electrical resistivity monitoring. And yeah, you can see pretty much of the survey line is within the forest. And for this site, the annual precipitation is about 548 millimeters. And also 60% of the precipitation there in the form of snow. And also the annual temperature is about 8 degrees C. And the evapotranspiration is pretty high. It is about 80, more than 80, yeah, more than 80% of the total precipitation. And also, as I said, we have very long-term, you can see here is the weather station, and we have very long-term monitoring data. Okay, so this figure shows the we did some calculation. For example, we calculated for the year of 2023. I think that's the year 2023, and then we calculate what is the ET, daily ET, and also we calculate the cumulative ET, which is the green line, and also we calculate the precipitation, cumulative precipitation, and also daily precipitation. In addition to that, we also calculate the storage of the subsurface. It's like this is the total storage. We use the water balance method to estimate the total storage. Total storage, you can see at the beginning, it's very high in April 1st, because it's like we didn't consider the snow melt. So we just consider the precipitation. It's like snow, they are part of the storage as well. That's why you can see during this period it's pretty high. And then over time, it just decreases. And then around the November, they start to increase again because of the precipitation. Here is short video showing the survey line where we put the electrical resistivity. And the cable you see is not for electrical resistivity, rather it's for the seismic method. So at the site, we did two different tests. The first test is the seismic method. So the purpose of the seismic method is like we are trying to get the velocity image, so that from velocity image we can know the soil layer and also the fracture bedrock layer. And then from there we can divide the subsurface into different regions, and then we run the seismic the electrical resistivity monitoring over time. And those lines there, they indicate the date that we collected the data. And if you remember, some of you may remember, it's like in 2023 we have very large snowfall. In the springs, we have very large snowfall. That's why this was one of the motivations why we want to study this site, is because we have a very it's like in the last 20 years. This is, I think it's 23 is the heaviest snowfall. And then we wrote a NSF rapid proposal to use geophysical method to monitor, okay, after snowfall, what's the subsurface, what storage is going to change. And then we did about 10 of the geophysical tests roughly bi-weekly. And then, so we try to use the geophysical electrical resistivity to see what the subsurface storage change over time after this big snowfall. Yeah. So you can see like the site is like, it's not easy to run the resistive test. Even walking is not easy at all. And then, but the students who did test is Sky Benzo, and in about like you can see it's like more than one semester through the summer, from summer through the winter, and then he went there almost bi-weekly to collect the data. Each data for reference is like each of the tests will cost about several hours, like 4-5 hours, 2-3 hours to collect data, and then putting some electrodes in the ground surface and then collect it, and also make sure it works, lay down the cables, and then it will cost about a day to finish the test. Great. So since we are going to mention many things about electrical, like a seismic method, and then electrical resistivity, I will give some background knowledge about what is seismic imaging. So seismic method is like we put a lot of geophones. For example, these triangles indicate one geophones, and then we put a lot of geophones on the ground surface, and then to monitor the ground movement, and then we use a sledgehammer to hit the ground, and then the wave will propagate in the subsurface, and then to find they will be refracted at some boundaries and then refracted back to the surface, so the geophone can monitor the data. And all the geophones, they can collect the data, and because it takes time for the wave to travel through the subsurface, go to the geophone location, and then that's why you can determine the time for each of them. For example, this one is you put the geophone here, you put the seismic source here, and then travel time is the y-axis. Each of the trees indicates is the location of the geophone. You can see it's like we have a lot of geophones, and each of them, they can monitor the ground response. And then it takes some time. The farther you go away from the seismic source, and then it will take longer for you to receive data. This red line just indicates, okay, how long does it take for the geophones to receive the signal? And then This is one shot, and then you can move the seismic source to a different location. For example, move it here, and then you can just record data as well, and then you move to different locations, and then you can collect different other type of data. So your data coverage will be large enough so that you can resolve the subsurface velocity. This is the final results of the subsurface velocity distribution. This is if we pick up the arrival time and then plot it in distance and versus time, and then for different time, different shot location, and then you have the measurement. So inversion is a process that we don't know the subsurface velocity, but we have some measurements, and then we assume one subsurface velocity, and then we do iteratively, and then we refine the subsurface model. Eventually, this subsurface model will produce similar results as the field measurement, and then we believe this is the best subsurface model, seismic velocity model we can get for the site. Yeah. This is, for example, at the tree lines, at the Lower Deer Pond site, where some photos show the gears we used to collect the data, and also here shows like one of the field computers, like we control the data collection process, and this is in the upper part, for example, it's in this region, upper part of the slope. We don't have accounting for trees a lot, but we do have some other plants, which make it even worse for us to conduct the geophysical tests. So this one shows the resistivity model. Sorry, this is the seismic model, seismic velocity model from the seismic survey, and then from there we can, as we mentioned a little bit, it's like a soil and fresh bedrock they have different velocities, and then from the velocity difference, and then we can draw a line to separate different layers. For example, the regolith layer, their velocity usually is lower than 1,000 for granitic soils, is less than 1,000, and then we can draw a line here. And for weather bedrock or fracture bedrock and fresh bedrock, their velocity is also different. It's roughly between 2,500 in this case, and then we can draw another line. And then this shows us how the soil depths and fracture bedrock depths, they vary at different slope locations. Okay, so that's the seismic, and then we also have electrical resistivity survey, which is a little different. It's like electrical resistivity, we need to input some of the electrodes. We call electrodes, it's just stainless steel bar we insert. For example, probably you can see from this one, you cannot see the stainless steel. This one probably is the stainless steel bar. Yeah, it's like a saw nail, just nail it into the ground. And then in each of the tests, you use 4 of the electrodes. For example, the A, B, and M, N, those 4 electrodes. A and B is connected to cables, and then you can send electric current and go through A into the ground surface, and then retrieved by B. And then since you inject current, and then on the ground surface, the electrical potential will be different. So you can use M and N, so you can measure the potential difference. From a potential and current, you can calculate the resistance of the subsurface at this location. And then you can change the 4 electrodes, their location, for example, move it, align it to a different location, so that you can measure at other locations what is the resistance. And also you can change the separation, like the spacing between A and M and N and B. For example, if you reduce the spacing, that means like your current cannot go very deep. You are measuring the shallow subsurface. And then if you make the distance very large, for example, A is here, the B is at the end, and then your current will go very deep. You can sense the deeper ground. And then since all the electrodes, they are connected through this coaxial cable, multi-core, they have multi-cores in the cable, so that you don't need to manually switch it. Rather, it's like they have a resistivity meter. You can upload some sequence to ask for the resistivity meter to take the measurement. And then once you collect all the data, you can plot them as a pseudo depths. That means like a different depths, you can have some data, but this is not the true resistivity. This is only some measurement, because if you put it this data, for example, the last data, that is two data is when you put A and B as at both ends, and then use M and N somewhere in between, measure the resistivity. It not only measures the deep soil, but also measures the shallow soil as well. That's why you need a process called inversion to recover what is the true distribution of the resistivity of the subsurface. So that the data processing involves a lot of like a data processing and also some inversion process to get the resistivity model. Here are some photos showing the resistive survey, the gears. We have cables, and then here's like a field survey, and this one is like we have different cables, and then we use some box to connect it so that all the cables they are connected to each other. Okay, so now it goes to like once we have a resistivity, how we can connect it to water content. And in general, it's like in geophysics, we know very well it's like the electrical conductivity or electrical resistivity of soil and rock. They are influenced significantly by water content. This figure I show you at this site, we collect some soil samples and then we measure at different saturations, water saturations, what is the conductivity or the inverse of resistivity. Conductivity is the inverse of resistivity. So in the field, we usually use resistivity, this term, but in the lab, it's like we tend to use electrical conductivity. You just think it's like just one over the other one. So you can see it's like when the water content goes low, and then you have a very low conductivity, that means your resistivity will be very high. And when you have a high saturation, and then the conductivity will be high, but your resistivity will be low. So in general, it's like a high water content, you have low resistivity. You have low water content, and then you have high conductivity. You have high resistivity. So this one just shows typical electrical resistivity results when we invert data, and then here shows the site what it looked like. I think this was done in the summer. From this figure, you can see, as we mentioned, it's like this region, the first region above top region, that's the soil layer, and then in between is the fracture bedrock, and then below that is the fresh bedrock. You can see it's like for the electrical resistivity along the slope is very heterogeneous. Here at slope top is pretty high, and then slope toe is pretty low, and also for the soil layer in general, their resistivity is pretty high. The resistivity is high, that means you have less water. So for the soil layer, you have less water compared to the rock layer, you have some blue regions. That means the resistivity is very low. So their water content is pretty high. And in general, it's like we also compare different locations. The lower location, you have low resistivity, high water content. High above the slope, you have a very high resistivity, less water content. That's what we observed from one of the tests. And then if we combine all of the 10 images together, and then you can find that's a temporal change of the resistivity at this site clearly. And one thing is like for shallow soil moisture, for the shallow soil layer, we didn't see a very clear change. Like pretty much it stays very stable. And also their value is pretty high. When I say value is high, resistivity is very high. That means their water content is relatively low and it's very stable. It's very stable. And also for the deep rock moisture, in this region, we believe that's rock moisture. That's rock moisture. You can see it's like the bottom half of the rock layer, their water content stays pretty much very stable. It's very wet. And until September, from summer until September. And then after September, and then when you go into October, you start to see this region is like the water content start to decrease. And then in the fall, November and December, we don't have data in December, but November you start to see it's like their water content start to increase. So this is the general trend that we can see. And on the slope top, we didn't really see anything. It's like it's just dry all the time. That's why also this part of the region is like we didn't have conifer trees at all. If you recall the satellite image there, it's like we don't have a conifer trees on this region. The conifer trees is only at the bottom and the top half of the lower half of the slope. Yeah. So we try to analyze the temporal trend, and then what we did is like we calculated the average soil resistivity and also rock resistivity of the, for example, it's like we have this, and then we calculate in this region, soil region, what is the average resistivity over time, and also the rock layer, what is the average resistivity over time. That is the dot. The star is the soil resistivity. That's from resistivity. You can see it's like a pretty stable. Those dots, these stars, they are very stable over time. And also the circle blue line, and then that's the rock resistivity in the rock layer, the resistivity. You can see they change quite large over time. And also for comparison, we also use two different things. The first one, we use soil moisture at the very shallow subsurface. When we see very shallow, it's like 5 centimeters or 8 centimeters, which is near the surface, the TDR measurement data. We use that TDR soil moisture data, and then calculate what is the resistivity. If you recall, that's a plot. It's like the saturation and also resistivity, they have a relationship. And then we can use that relationship to convert the surface measures of moisture to resistivity and plot it here for this year. And also this dashed line, we use storage estimated from water balance method. For example, we have precipitation, we have ET, and then we can calculate, okay, for this site overall, what is the storage? From that storage, we can calculate the average moisture content. From that line, we can also calculate what is the resistivity for comparison. And you can see it's like for the soil layer, for the very shallow soil, and then their response is quite different from the others. And then this one, the changes very dynamically. And then because they are very shallow, so they are very much influenced by the precipitation. If you have very small rainfall, and then only 5 centimeters, let's say 5 centimeters of the soil was wet due to the rainfall, and then you can see the responses here. But deeper, for the soil layer, entire layer, we cannot really see that. But from the from the storage data as did from the water balance analysis, you can see this dashed line is consistent with the soil layer resistivity. What this tells us is, so the water balance analysis for the site, they give us an average moisture content that is equivalent or consistent with what we observed in the soil layer, their response. For the rock layer, we don't have any data. The water balance analysis does not give us the indication of the trend at all. And also, for the shallow subsurface, it does not represent shallow subsurface soil moisture we measure from TDR does not represent the subsurface storage at all. And also, what is more interesting for me is like I want to look at the time when the soil moisture, surface moisture reach peak value, and then that is when you have most precipitation. And also the time when the rock moisture reach peak time is this location. Oh, this is like a peak time. It's not the precipitation, it's like a dry period. It's like the driest because the resistivity is high. That means like you have less water. That's during summer, it's August. In Idaho, August is like the driest season ever. And then you have this dry, that's due to in the shallow surface. And then this is the rock moisture. Rock resistivity is high. That means rock moisture is low. And compare these two time, that's about 2 months delay for the rock moisture. So you can see it's like for the soil layer, their moisture content is pretty much stable, although it's dry, but pretty much stable. For the rock moisture, they change over time, but they are about 2 months delay in rock moisture in response to the precipitation or the climate. Yeah. So this is what we found. It's like that's a delay for rock moisture. Okay, and then we're going to show you, this is from the conifer slope, and then let me show you some other results from the shrub slope. We are still in the dry creek, but the site now becomes not forest anymore. It's just a shrub. It's sagebrush, forbs, and grass, and scattered Douglas fir. But at the site, we collected the data, there's no Douglas fir at all. And annual precipitation somehow is higher. the ET bar is lower because vegetation is different. So the ET in general is low, and average temperature is about 10 degrees C. And here is the DM model, shows the two lines, survey lines, and then the yellow line is where we did the seismic survey, and then the red line is ERT, resistivity line, we put it there. For this site, we use a customized resistivity meter, and then we use these cables. We have 72 electrodes with 1 meter spacing. We deploy them across the slope, across the ridge, and then here's a box. We host all of the geophysical, the resistivity meter and batteries, and then the cables connect. All these cables connect the electrodes to the resistivity meter. So the box was in the field for about a year. So at the site, we have some weather data. You can see for this site, we have the green line, that's the ET. Green line, ET usually peaks in the June and then decreases to 0 by August. That means it's like we only have shrubs. Their root was not deep enough to access to the rock moisture. So in dry summer, and then they pretty much stop using water at all. And also for the stream flow, you can see stream flow is the black line here. They peak around April. That is the time that you have the snow melt, and then you pick it. And then after May, you really don't see any stream flow at all, and then it's dry. The creek is dry. Yeah. And from June to about end of September, you have no rainfall at all. Okay, so similarly, it's like we also calculate the storage estimate from water balance analysis, which is the dashed line for the site. And also we have the black line, which is the measured soil moisture from the TDR sensors. I think it is roughly 10 centimeters or 15 centimeters below the ground surface. And from there, you can see the storage, they get recharged from December storage. For example, let's look at the black line. And then it's like before January, it's like it's pretty low. And then after January, it's like they got recharged, and then they reach full capacity roughly between from February to all the way to January to June. And then after June, they start to decrease. Okay, this one shows the critical zone structure from seismic results. And remember, it's like we have the seismic survey. They cross the ridge, and also they reach part of the valley bottom, and then that's this side. That's the south. That's the northeast side. For the southwest side, it goes into a small catchment also, but didn't reach the bottom yet. Yeah, and also from this side, you can see we see part of the fresh bedrock, which is very close to the valley bottom, but at the top of slope, we didn't really see the fresh bedrock, only see regolith and weather bedrock. Yeah. So on north-facing slope, northeast-facing slope, you have 3 layers. On the southwest slope, you only have 2 layers. Those difference, surface structure difference, give us some difference for the rock moisture response, as we show later. Okay, so here is the electrical resistivity. We collect data for this water year from 2023 to 2024, the water year. Yeah. So first is like from the resistivity data, what we did is like we collect data daily, but we don't collect, it's like we didn't process all the daily data because the data, this resistivity meter is a little different from the one we used for the other site. This one is lower power, so that data is quite noisy. You have to average over several days and then to get a reliable reading. And then what we did is like we just process for weekly data. For each week, we average all the data together, and then we invert data. And then for this yearly weekly data, what we observe 2 things. The first one is the wetting period. What we can clearly see that, for example, for this region in the circle, you can see this region over time, that's from December all the way to May. You can see during this period, the region, this region, their resistivity is high, high, and then over time decrease. So that is because you have more water. So that's one thing you can observe. For the other side of the slope, the rock moisture is in the rectangle in this region. We didn't see large change at all. Yeah, so that means it's like for these two slopes, the northeast facing slope, the rock moisture is very dynamic. It can be influenced by precipitation so that you have wetting. But for the other side of the slope, which is the southwest facing, the rock moisture is pretty much similar, quite stable. And then I don't know the reason, but I'm trying to use because the rock layer, the fracture bedrock layer is very thick, and then it has the ability to hold more water. That's why I know it's probably because of this, and then the rock moisture is just stable over time. This is the wetting period, and also for the drying period, what can see is similar. It's like for the drying period, still within the northeast facing slope, and then you can see here is high, it is low, relatively low, stable, and over time you can see it's high. That's the drying period. And also what also you can see is like on the ground surface, very close to ground surface. Very close to the ground surface. At the beginning, it's like a May, roughly around May. It is pretty low values in terms of resistivity. That means the water content is pretty high. Over time, you start to see these small regions that you have red colors. That is high resistivity. That means you have a low water content. So for this one, it's like the drying period. It's very clear in both soil and rock layer compared to the wetting period. The wetting period is only obvious in the rock layer, but for drain period, it's clear for both soil layer and rock layer. But the drying southwest slope, for example, is on this side. It's like you can see the near surface. They are more significant than the other side. They are more significant than the other side. Yeah. And also in the rocks, drying are only significant on the northeast slope. That's this region. It's very clear, but it's not clear on the other side of the slope. So the last problem is like in rocks, storage are stable in southwest slope. That's this region. And again, it's like I'm trying to use the fact that on the southwest slope, you have a thicker rock layer so that you can host more water. That's why you can keep the slope very wet during the season. Okay, so we also try to plot like with time, what is the response at different locations of the slope. For example, we use northeast and slope top, and also southwest different slopes. That corresponds to A, B, C, 3 different plots. And also the green line, they are deep rock moisture. And then deep rock, they are not moisture, but they are resistivity. And also the blue dot, they are blue lines, they are soil layer. And then you can see from this one is rock moisture in the northeast slope, they vary more frequently. This one you can see sometimes they are even lower their value resistivity, even lower than soil resistivity, but sometimes just go very high. That means it's very dry, and then can be very wet, and then can be very dry. It changes. It's quite different from the other two locations. So, excuse me. For example, at the slope top, it's like your rock resistivity is always lower than the soil resistivity. At the site, at the southwest slope, the rock resistivity is always lower than the soil resistivity. But on the northeast slope, it's quite different. Yeah. And that means like the rock moisture in the slope, on the slope top, and also on the southwest, rock moisture is always higher than you can see it's always higher than the soil moisture. So that means it's like compared to soil, rock will store more water than soil at those locations, slope top and the southwest slope. And also what we did is like we tried to find the lag time. Can we observe the same lag? If you remember, it's like in the other site, what we observed is there's a lag for the rock moisture to reach the dry condition, and it took about 2 months for the rock to reach dry condition compared to shallow subsurface. And then what we plot here is like we use the Archie's law, which is connects the moisture content to resistivity. For example, rho is resistivity and S is degree of saturation. We can convert resistivity to degree saturation. For example, if we assume the maximum degree of saturation is just 1, and then we can plot the saturation over time for two locations, slope top and also southwest slope. And from there, you can see we at the southwest slope, we did see there's a lag between the soil moisture and the rock moisture. For example, here is the saturation. It is the peak is time is around June for the soil moisture, but the peak is about July for rock. It's about 1 month delay for the wetting period. For the drying period, we didn't observe there's a lag there. We don't know. Probably that's a lag, but we cannot make a decision, make a conclusion from that. It's like we did not observe a lag between the soil and rock moisture in the drying period. And also slope top and northeast slope did not show a lag as well. And so that means it's like the lag can only be observed at some slopes, like the north-facing slope for south-facing slope for this case, and also the slope top we cannot observe that either. Yeah. So really, it's like it's unclear what really was the role of a specific structure on the rock moisture. So that's more work, clearly more work need to be done. Okay, so I just some very brief summary of this study is like yes, geophysics play a very important role in characterizing the surface and also monitoring water dynamics. And at the conifer slope, rock moisture, they do have some lag behind the surface soil moisture, about 2 months in drying period. At a constant slope, it's like rock moisture, the moisture content in the soil layer is very stable. It's pretty drier compared to the rock moisture. And the shrub slope, rock moisture at different slope aspects and locations, they behave differently. And the thicker, you have a thicker rock layer, and then you have a more stable rock moisture. And when you have a thinner rock layer, and then rock moisture is very dynamic in response to the precipitation and weather. And also at the shrub slope, it's like if you have a thicker rock layer, and we do observe a lag for the rock moisture and the surface soil moisture during the wetting period. But in the drying period, we did not observe that. So clearly more work is needed to try to understand what's the rock moisture dynamics. That is the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
All right, great, thank you. And again, we can take questions. There's actually, it looks like something popped into Q&A. Yeah, I don't know, Qifei, if you can see the Q&A, and then some questions may come in through the chat as well. But there's a question here, I'll just read it for the group in case folks can't see it. It says, is it fair to say that if precipitation snow continued through August and September, the river would likely continue to flow, thereby creating increased rock and soil moisture on the southwest slope?
Yes, I would say, yeah, I would say that, yeah. So it's like the only reason we don't have that is like because like in the summer, we really don't have no rainfall at all. There's no precipitation at all, yeah.
And then I guess we'll also invite for folks who are in the classrooms, if anybody is in the classrooms, either here in Moscow or Boise, has any questions, jump in. Oh, and there's one I just saw that came in through the chat. Says, I was wondering what you think the potential mechanism that leads to that the rock moisture lag could be.
That's a very good question. It's like I don't know why, and I think it's like the permeability of rock and soil, they are quite different, and then it took time for the rock to respond to that. And also, this is one factor. Another factor is you have plants, and then their roots can go deep. And then most of them, I think, is like they just try to consume soil moisture. If soil moisture is not available, they consume all the available soil moisture. And then they start to consume rock moisture. And then that creates a time lag there. Yeah. I think that explains why in the drying period and wetting period, why there's a lag there. Yeah. But we don't know. I mean, probably stream flow is another thing that we should consider. It's like some of the moisture in the rock, they may contribute to stream flow generation or deep drainage. We don't know that. It's too deep and then we cannot see that. Yeah.
I'm going to jump into the question as well. We've got about 5 minutes if folks have more questions, but I was wondering, could you maybe back up to slide 19 or 20? I had a question on that one. It looked like there is, and this is just, I'm kind of curious. Yeah, it looks like there's that blue zone on the left of the slide. Is that due to subsurface properties, do you think, or is that maybe due to like a preferential flow pathway?
There could be a preferential flow pathway. Yeah. So like this test was done on a 2D condition. It's like we assume it's 2D, but clearly it's not 2D. There must be some water, not from above the slope, but rather from the other direction. It's like some water goes there. Yeah, that's what we guess. We really don't know why. And also we didn't drill at all because I think this location is about more than 10 meters below the ground surface. We cannot drill. And we have many speculations. It's like, okay, there are fault there. Oh, what happened there? We just don't know. Yeah.
All right. Couple more minutes. Any other questions out there? Okay.
There's another question was, I was wondering what you think the potential mechanism. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's already answered. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that was on the very end.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll say thanks again for doing the talk and taking what has been a simple concept of hillslope hydrology and making it much more realistic and complicated. So anyway.
Great. Thank you very much.
Great. All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah.
Cheers.
Mm-hmm.